Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Matt Parisi, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Tealium, and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes and will be recorded. The slides and recording will be made available at the end of the session. We have some related resources available for you in the attachments and links section of the platform, so please feel free to check those out at any point. If there's something that you find helpful or important during this webinar, we'd love it if you would share socially and mention @Tealium. And lastly, we want to hear your questions. Please use the Q&A feature to submit those. For any that we aren't able to answer live, we'll follow up with you after. All right, and now on to today's presenters. James McCormick is a principal analyst at Forrester. He is the leading global analyst tracking and defining the value and impact of digital customer information on digitally transforming businesses. His digital intelligence models recognize the big data and advanced analytics approaches that transformed businesses have taken to continually optimize and evolve decisions, experiences, and actions. With his research and experience, he works with senior leaders on insights strategies for sustained market differentiation. James also works with all sizes of technology and services vendors in the digital data, analytics, personalization, and optimization space to define their business strategy, go-to-market, and product roadmaps. Dave Lucas is Senior Director of Product at Tealium, where he develops industry-leading products for customer data, analytics, and machine learning. Dave has over 15 years of experience in leading data teams and programs with a focus on ensuring that any organization's data efforts create actual end value for humans, a challenge he refers to as the last mile. Prior to Tealium, Dave was head of data for Fracture and managed process improvements at multi-billion-dollar enterprises. He is a licensed Six Sigma black belt with degrees in information systems, business administration, psychology, philosophy, and English. And with that, let's get started. James, over to you.
Thank you, Matt, for such a kind of introduction. It's a real privilege and honor to be presenting alongside Dave Lucas on a really interesting and I think a powerful topic today. For my part of the discussion today, I want to give Forrester's view on the role and evolution of AI-driven experiences and personalization. I want to kind of discuss the evolution of AI and ML techniques for personalization. I want to then review the risks and opportunities of their tech in this space, right? It's huge, right? There's on both sides, on the risk side and the opportunity side, and we'll dig into that. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the strategic approaches for getting it right, because believe me, we're going to start to get it wrong pretty soon, and we are already. So let's talk about that, right? For this part of the discussion, I want to look at the business case for doing this, right? Why do we want to leverage AI for personalization, and why is AI important, and why is personalization important? Why should they come together? To start the discussion, I want to look at firms that are really doing this kind of stuff well. You know, what do? They voraciously compete on experiences, so very aggressively able to beat us or beat firms that aren't competing on experiences. And they do that through linking data analytics to generate insights that drive these experiences. And they're able to do it at scale. And they're able to do it continuously in ways that provide them this kind of competitive advantage and differentiation in the marketplace. And this is not something that just us as practice leads, as a kind of a marketer or product developer need to be concerned about. Yes, we do, but it's also our executive teams. It's the CEO that needs to be worried about. And these insights-driven firms, or something we at Forrester have been tracking for a number of years now, right? And since about 2016, we saw that these firms amongst them will generate about just under $500 billion annually on a global basis, right, together. So that's an aggregated figure. And by next year, by the end of next year, that figure will be $1.8 trillion. So this is something that your CEO really needs to worry about. You should become insights driven yourself. And there's two places where, two reasons actually why insights-driven businesses are beating the rest of us, right? One is they're just able to do what we all do, but do it better, right? So they can, for instance, do better advertising, better marketing by connecting the data, the analytics to generate insights to drive those activities, better commerce, better product and product delivery, right? So they can just do what we all do, but just do it better by linking up these things. But actually, more interestingly, they can just do different things, right? Because they are able to take all the data that they have and select the right data to deliver the right insight at the right moment for the right decision, action, and experience. They're able to deliver new and innovative products and services. So that's really the exciting thing about these insights-driven firms. And a lot of that is driven through personalization. So I want to put kind of names to faces, so to speak, and talk a little bit about who these firms are. And a lot of them will be obvious to you, right? So we all know that Netflix has completely transformed its whole business using personalization approaches such as recommendations, right? To basically target better their videos and the content that they have with the right affinities and customers and audiences, right? So really good at that. Jeff Bezos back in the 90s had this vision for Amazon where which put personalization at the heart of it, and using things like AI-driven approaches like recommendations and targeting approaches. He's really it's one of the greatest companies of our generation. Stitch Fix, delivers great products and services. So a combination of what they call fashion items, should I say, that their stylists where the stylists work with a machine learning algorithm to deliver that right combination, that personalized product. You've got Facebook that personalizes many things, using using things like location, the content that people have consumed, their social networks to deliver personalization. So really kind of powerful. Some people might say it's almost too influential, too powerful, right? So really effective. And then Earnest, which is one of my favorites, right? Targets the right loan at the right rate to their customers, typically students that are looking for student loans, right? And uses hundreds of thousands of data points that these students give over to them in order to determine their risk profile. So they go beyond, for instance, credit scoring, etc., creating huge barriers to entry for their competitors, right? So hopefully now we can see the power. I've made the case for the power of AI-driven personalization. And so now I'd like to define it a little bit more tightly so we can put some discipline into this, into this practice. So, there's many different definitions in the literature, right? One of the latest kind of interesting things that the European Commission published was their view on AI and the ethics around that, right? It's published a month or so ago, and it defines AI in terms of algorithms and in terms of the data that is used, right? And also my fellow analyst Brandon Purcell has tackled the definition. And this is what he says, right? It says that AI-driven personalization solutions are ones that apply machine learning to customer or employee data to frame, guide, extend, and enhance interactions, right? So you can see that algorithms and data are very important when describing AI and personalization. It is also a useful way to describe the landscape of AI for personalization or machine learning for personalization techniques that are available on the market today and being applied in practice as well. So, when we look at how when we look at the value that AI brings to personalization, we can see it applies in many different parts of that. So let's take a look at that, right? So when we are using data to deliver a targeted experience or a personal experience, we need to collect it first. We need to measure the customer experience. We need to measure the experience itself, right, and the behaviors of that customer. So the first thing that these algorithms do is that we can measure more, right, and we can measure in a more standardized kind of way, so enabling that. Secondly, they're able to take that kind of vast amount of data that's coming our way in terms of contextual behavioral performance data, and they're able to better evolve insights or to better evolve what we know about our customer and our business at that particular moment. And then finally, they're able to then apply those insights to change the experience, deliver a new action or a new decision, right? So very good at doing that. So you can see that AI driven personalization allows us to scale experiences in ways that were just not possible before we brought the concepts of personalization and AI together. So I'd like to tighten the definition for AI-driven personalization a little further, right? And I'm going to define that in terms of a risk kind of landscape or risk map, right? Particularly around two dimensions. One is algorithmic risk, which is basically kind of stating the more sophisticated an algorithm becomes, the greater the skills are needed to build, understand, and control them, and the greater the chances things will go wrong, and that we are and we will be unaware of those risks, right? And we all know that when things go wrong with personalization, they go wrong at scale, because by definition, personalization is a scalable thing, right? So that's the algorithm risk. Second is the data risk, right? And we all, I don't want to talk too much about this because we all understand the risks of PII and the legislation that we need to comply with in order to deal with that, and the risks of the volume and complexity of the data and controlling it, right? And so when you define the landscape in this way, it's good to then, okay, so what components or what approaches to personalization do we put in this landscape? So the first is, let's start with the basics, just simple A/B testing. That is, tends to be rules-based and tends to, well, the typical implementations are using kind of non-sensitive behavioral data to target these tests and use these tests to essentially understand statistical significance. You've then got rules-based targeting approaches, which are pretty mature nowadays, using a swath of types of data, from kind of behavioral data, contextual data, transactional data, sensitive customer data, and everything in between, right? And those are quite common today, and using fairly simple approaches that the average kind of business person, operational person can really understand, right? And then you get almost the opposite kind of mirror image of that, where you have techniques that use non-sensitive data, but quite sophisticated algorithms that we might not understand as well as in more rules-based approaches. And there you can put like trend-based recommendations, such as product recommendations or recommendations based on season. We understand, these data, they generally consume non-sensitive data, right? But using quite sophisticated algorithms. And then we get into things like multivariate testing, MVT, right? Which we know has largely, many firms still use it, but have, it hasn't been as successful as some of the other kind of data and AI and machine learning techniques out there. Then you get into things that are more, successful as techniques, so AI-based behavioral targeting. So leveraging our behaviors, our customers' visitor, in a visitor context, to target them with experiences and ads and targeted events. And then you get more interesting stuff occurring nowadays, which is maturing, which is using contextual data to target. So, what channels that person in, what time of day are they when we're targeting them, what is their location. So contextual, and that generally comes together with behavioral data to deliver targeting through using these machine learning algorithms to drive that, right? And again, these are maturing capabilities that many of us come from firms that that use these personalization techniques. And then we get the more powerful and slightly riskier profile-based recommendations, using everything, of course, from the cookie profile all the way through to a more a known customer profile that's obviously a lot more sensitive in terms of its use, right, and all the attributes around that, right? And so these are starting to evolve today. And then finally, we get what I call omni-feature experience optimization, right? So the data scientists amongst us we use the term feature to replace the term attribute, right? So a person attribute, a product attribute, and it's these features that we look to drive the algorithm, or that the algorithm uses, right? And these algorithms don't really care too much, and the approaches don't really care whether it's a product, whether it's a person, whether it's a context, or whether it's anything else, right? The entities, it doesn't really care. It just, whatever feature is significant, it'll use in order to drive that personalization. So you can see that there's a few more, right? These are just some of the main kind of approaches to AI-driven personalization that we all know and love today. You may have noticed that there's a strong relationship between scale, sophistication, and data. And it's the relationship with data that provides a clue as to why many of us are really struggling with these kind of approaches, or data-driven approaches today. So let's, and apologies, just bear with me as I take us through a little bit of a history lesson where, I remember the days when we just had browsers and email, and the way that we understood our customers were through fairly simplistic web analytics approaches, right? Where we understood the visitor in a fairly anonymous form, in a visitor form, or even just a kind of log file or a server impression, right? And that's the way in the past, that we understood our customers. Of course, these techniques got a little bit more sophisticated nowadays. But then came along other techniques like a testing engine that collected data, our behavioral targeting engine that collected data about our customers and their engagements, our performance management data, APM data as it's called on here, collects data, our CX and interaction analytics technologies collect data. And that landscape got worse as we brought together other measurement techniques for measuring, say, smartphone, social engagements, and it just became a lot more complicated and more fractured, right? And we brought in things like tag management and data layer management in order to solve much of those problems. But a lot of the problems have still remained for many of our firms, and kind of got worse as we brought in third-party data via DRMs. And we nowadays, many of us are bringing in our first-party data through CRM. So you can see that we need a more joint-up approach to trying to solve this problem, right? So this is where we are today.
Yeah, and James, Dave Lucas here. If I can just jump in for 1 second, I absolutely can attest to this. In my previous roles, building data programs for various enterprises, this is still the primary challenge. It absolutely is. So I guess, James, the question is there, then how do we solve this thing, right?
Dave, and so for me, it's not easy, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. But the answer really lies with these insights-driven businesses that we've talked about, right? We talked about the Amazon and those kind of organizations, and they essentially have a top-down approach, right? So for many of us, our stack kind of looks like that dog's breakfast I showed in the previous slide, right? But it's only like that because we haven't intentionally thought about it, bringing it together, right? We just haven't had a vision for doing that. What we find with the insights-driven businesses is that they have this concept and a vision to bring their systems of insight, so all those data and analytics and processing systems that seek to understand the data around their business and their customers, they bring it together under a single umbrella strategy to try and bring that together, right, with the right exec kind of bringing it together. They also have a similar strategy around systems of engagement, right? So there's the systems that engage with their consumers, their customers, the employees, right? And they seek to then sync up those engagements. And what's more is that they are very consciously bringing their systems of insight and their systems of engagement together. So kind of closing the loop, so to speak, around that. So it is very quite intentional, right? And what it looks like from their perspective, when you take those same technologies that we looked at that, with those, that kind of fractured landscape that we looked at, or datascape that I looked at, and they bring it together. So they in systems of insight, they take all the engagement data technologies and their analytics technologies around engagement, and they bring them together, and they seek to sync them out. So they eliminate redundancies. They look for ways to integrate that data where appropriate. They look for ways to standardize the way that that information flows between them. They try and understand how teams, say for the app teams, work with the social teams, and they look for the cross-team processes to work together as well. And they, as I said, they try and inject that into their systems of engagement through optimization and personalization algorithms, such as testing, recommendations, behavioral targeting, content targeting. So many of the things that we talked today, which obviously then engages within the touch point, or is implemented within the touch point, and influences the context and behavior of that customer, right? And so quite simply, the way to solve this kind of fractured landscape is we have to realize it's there and it's causing a problem, and we need to intentionally bring it together, right? So I quite often talk about this, and quite often folks ask me, okay, so what is the role of machine learning in this stack, or where does it fit in that stack? Well, the answer is it really fits across the entire stack. So we're getting products and that vendors are building technology products in the space that, for instance, have intelligent assistants that are helping us understand the data better, or understanding, hey, did you realize that this is high value segment there, or helping us set up our personalization campaigns, etc. So though there's a lot of kind of AI approaches, just from that intelligent assistance approach. Of course, you've got things like computer vision. I've mentioned audience segmentation, especially around the discovery of that. You've got trend-based personalization I've talked about. You've got NLP in your text analysis. So there's a whole bunch of techniques and many more that are especially around predictive scoring, that are emerging and are kind of hot topics today. And so you can see that machine learning and AI techniques and algorithms have a role across that entire kind of systems of insights and systems of engagement landscape, but particularly around digital customer engagement, right, which many of us on this call are interested in today. So the other thing that these insights-driven businesses think about is they think a little bit outside the box, right? So let me explain. So this is a typical diagram that depicts the life cycle of engagement that we as brands have with our customers, from when they discover our brands, basically explore our products and services, buy them, use them, ask for support about them, and also engage amongst each other and with the brand on an ongoing basis. You'll notice that right-hand side is typically or the kind of marketing and commerce funnel, right? Especially in the digital context. And it's here that most of us on this call, or just about all of us, come from firms that have invested significantly in kind of intelligence and personalization techniques on that side. It's where we spend a lot of time, right? But actually, when you look at the Earnests, when you look at the Netflix, and the folks like Amazon, it's all about delivering the product and service, right? So helping the customer use the product, consume the service, helping them, supporting them with that use as well. And so it's that left-hand side that many of these insights-driven businesses that I've talked about are leveraging AI to personalize and enhance the value of their customers. And so, so what? What can we do about it? As most of us, 93% of the market, are not insights-driven in that kind of way. So where should we start? How should we think about it? Well, let's go back to this risk landscape, or this map around these techniques, right? And let's split it into 4 quadrants, right? And you go to the bottom left, right? And these essentially are kind of quite simple algorithmic and rules-based approaches. And the data used is relatively sensitive, so it's very low risk area, right? But they do deliver value, medium risk value, so you can get some simple kind of personalization, simple targeting approaches. You got ABN testing, split testing. Focus. Make sure that you're doing the basics right. These are low risk approaches, right? That deliver value, right? Medium value is it's not no value. It's not low value. It's medium. It's good value, and you should make sure you're maximizing the opportunity there for you, right? And then let's talk about the top left-hand side, right? So, as you evolve your capability around, and your skill set and your strategy around machine learning and AI in your firm, and which is where most of us are already chasing, you then are ready to start maybe experimenting with these approaches, but start off with the non-sensitive data, right? And there's some huge opportunities there around using high volume, high fidelity data to deliver personalization. Essentially, you don't have to be personal to personalize, right? You can use non-personal data or non-sensitive data to deliver great experiences that are actually quite relevant to individuals, right? So explore that. And then once you've leveraged technologies like Tealium and many of the other types of technologies, and improved your data management and data governance capabilities, and kind of can manage this highly sensitive kind of radioactive PII data in a compliant way, then it's time to start scaling the use of that data in a way that delivers value to your customers and to yourself. You're now ready to enter the high risk area of this highly sensitive data. And only then, once you've got your data governance process and your data management processes in place, once you've worked out your data science capabilities within your company, then it's time to look at those high value, high risk approaches that can deliver that micro segmentation and fantastic value to individuals. And so hopefully that gives you some feel for what do we do with AI and personalization? Where's the opportunities for us? So start with 1, go to 2, go to 3, and then quadrant 4 right at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dave Lucas, because that brings me to the end of my discussion. So Dave, over to you.
Great, thank you, James. That was a great explanation of the challenges that brands are experiencing right now around AI and personalization. For my portion of the webinar today, I'll walk through Tealium's view on how this might look in practice. Right now, the typical way to incorporate machine learning into your business is extremely time-consuming and expensive. You have to hire a team of data scientists, train them, let them spend months working on exploratory projects and iterating those, etc. And while there are a handful of auto ML tools on the market which claim to help lower some of these barriers to entry, I've often found them dissatisfying because they tend to be overly simple and they don't really meet the needs of your individual business or your individual projects very well. And then, of course, we've got some additional approaches that are out there on the market, such as tools offering an interface which allow you to bring your own model, so to speak, bring your own code into that tool itself where it would run. In the end, we need to find the right balance, as this slide illustrates. When should we emphasize speed and simplicity, and when do we seek to maximize control and flexibility? And frankly, I haven't seen that balance struck quite right anywhere in the market yet, which is why we've built Tealium Predict ML. This is the only approach that actually lets you, the business user, serve yourself. And this is how machine learning becomes mainstream, if you will. It's really about taking the focus off of the technology and putting it back on your customer. It's also about emphasizing speed. It's not very fun to have to worry about whether some model that you've brought into a marketing tool is going to run fast enough on that tool. We don't really have any idea about what kind of infrastructure they've got behind that curtain. Or, if any models that you've connected across your various systems are encountering issues related to security, privacy, consent. These are all headaches we want to seek to avoid. Now, James spoke earlier to the importance of systems of insight or intelligence and systems of engagement and the concept of connecting these two appropriately. Tealium generally works great as a system of engagement, right? And in certain situations, what we're finding is that it can also be great for becoming a system of insight. Now, I want to clarify that because I'm not saying that Tealium would ever replace a proper analytics tool or a step in my data science process in the big picture. However, there are often key small analysis tasks which may need to be performed over and over again. Usually something simple like just quickly visualizing data about a topic to understand it more deeply. And this is something that Tealium might make sense for, just like we see so many tools in MarTech incorporating their own sets of relevant reports or lightweight analysis tools. It's all about the right time and place to do something, right? The right time and place to do it that makes sense in your overall workflow. And sometimes we can generate some quick wins. So if we take that a step further, Predict does machine learning at the ideal point in the data supply chain. We've just integrated the data. We've got a 360-degree view of the customer. So essentially, we have a rich source of fuel for doing machine learning. And further, since we haven't yet acted on the machine learning across our various tools and channels, by doing the ML now, we can ensure quality and consistency across those tools and channels instead of being concerned that maybe machine learning done downstream in a point solution was different than a similar machine learning model done in a different point solution, right? Or in our own system. So Predict effectively allows us to empower all of those downstream channels and tools with consistent machine learning powered insights, regardless of whether those tools offer their own machine learning functionality or not. Because these insights are powered by that rich data set I mentioned, and because they're immediately available in the customer data platform, they allow us to propagate insights across channels and tools. So we can see here, we've got a lot of data coming in. We do machine learning at a great point in time, and it propagates out, as I mentioned. And that's, again, why we built Tealium Predict. Predict is an end-to-end auto machine learning tool that sits on top of our audience stream customer data platform and handles the entire technical process of machine learning for you. Everything from dataset preparation to model training to deployment and even infrastructure scaling and maintenance. Now with Predict, any non-technical user, any business user can create, train, and deploy a model without having to write a single line of code or needing a degree in statistics. It takes about 1 minute and about 5 clicks. You simply choose any user behavior you want to predict and the time frame you want to predict it for. We've even removed the need for guesswork and extensive exploratory analyses by showing you which of your user behaviors are ripe for predictions and which may need additional data before becoming healthy. There's no need for you to do any prep work with your data set. Now, if you want greater control to tweak your model, there are advanced configuration options. You can exclude attributes, change the date range for the training period, etc. So flexibility and transparency are the goal here. We want to avoid the concept of having a black box. Once you complete those simple steps, your model is automatically trained for you. And if you'd like to dig into the details, Predict provides all the metrics that a data scientist would expect for a model of this type. So we can see we've got sample details, F1 score and its constituent parts, confusion matrix, the ROC curve and the AUC value, distribution, etc. We also show you the exact data attributes that compose your algorithms for full transparency, and so you can learn about predictive factors in your data set that you may never have considered before. Now, if you want to retrain a new version, it's just a few clicks, but if you like what you see, you can deploy this model live in 1 click. If you go on the Model Explorer screen here, you can see every version of every model you've created. You can see details about their trainings, their health scores. You can see trend reports for the predictions being generated by any models you've deployed live, and more. Deployed models run after every single visit by every single visitor. So the predictions made are immediately integrated into your data set of those visitors, into your visitor profiles in Audience Stream, and they're available real time for activating however you like. You can create smarter audiences, orchestrate personalized experiences across all of your channels and tools for them. And effectively, like I mentioned earlier, you can empower your entire downstream MarTech stack with consistent machine learning powered data. So Predict avoids the typical problems of do-it-yourself solutions, such as isolated data sets and slow time to value, and dealing with infrastructure maintenance hassles yourself. And it avoids the pitfalls of those end-to-end tools that I mentioned earlier, which are kind of overly simple, rigid black boxes. So let's quickly talk through some examples. I want to emphasize here that one great strategy to get you started with your machine learning efforts, whether you're using Tealium Predict, doing it on your own, or any other approach, is to just look for ways to augment or improve the efficiency of use cases that you already do. So choose topics which are germane to your business and which you can immediately think of great ideas for how you would use the value of a machine learning model to actually create that better experience for your end user. This makes it a lot easier to define success, and it's going to increase your confidence along the way. This may sound obvious, but it's a key issue that plagues brands as they uplevel their machine learning efforts over time. So let's think through an example. Let's walk through kind of a before and after scenario here. And I'm going to use one that plagues essentially all of our clients and all the brands I've ever worked at myself across industries, which is abandonment, right? It's this idea that your user got midway to a conversion and then they abandoned from that goal or that conversion you were hoping they would do, and you'd love to see them come back and finish. So the most common version of this in some industries is what we call cart abandonment, right? And essentially all B2C brands have some sort of cart recovery campaign already in place. So notice here, the typical approach, as I mentioned, ends up with these results where every single person who abandons a cart is treated equally. You end up wasting your ad spend, or it's certainly inefficient anyway. You've given some customers negative experiencing and unneeded messaging. And overall, it's that inefficiency I discussed. Now, if we contrast this with a quote unquote smarter way of doing cart recovery using Tealium Predict or using a machine learning model, let's say that we took that same audience you had of everyone who abandoned a cart, and now we only take people in that group who have a likelihood to return to purchase within the next 2 days that's greater than 50%, right? So essentially, we've just removed everyone from this audience who was unlikely to come back and purchase from you. So great, already right there, we should have made some great efficiency gains. And now you'll notice this 80%. That's kind of a fun test I would try as a data person, just to see if I could get even more value out of this. What if I exclude from my campaigns for cart recovery everyone who was incredibly likely to already come back and purchase in the next 2 days, right? So here we're saying everyone who's above 80% likely to purchase. By doing this, maybe I can avoid having to give them a coupon code or a discount and thereby give away some of my profit margin, right? So we could A/B test this intelligent cart recovery audience with our typical approach as illustrated there on the left, to try to find the gains in our downstream ad and marketing efforts. So we could increase CPM bid, do more personalization, et cetera, and the results would be targeting the sweet spot, right? We're excluding a lot of people from our audience and really honing in. This optimizes ad spend, maximizes ad relevance, and ensures that we're allocating our resources and our messaging, our content, to only worthy prospects, right? Because it's not just about ad dollars, it's about all that time and effort you spend on content as well.
So this is just sort of a different view on that same example. Of left to right here is just showing the flow of what's happening. And so in this example, since our goal is revenue growth, we would start out on the left by bringing in purchase data from all relevant sources, such as your point of sale system, et cetera, and as much data around those purchases as possible. If we have access to demographic data or what kind of device was used, behavioral data, like what else they did on the website or the app before they purchased, etc. Then all this data needs to live somewhere so that it can be integrated and so the machine learning can happen. So data is organized around each individual customer or user and combined based on rules to create attributes. This results in a visitor profile, as we call it, where machine learning can sort of sit on top and be used to predict the likelihood of the tracked behavior. So in this case, likelihood to purchase in the next 2 days that we're going to use for cart recovery. So that predicted score becomes another data point that can then be used with your rules to trigger action and analysis. So you can use the predictions as the basis for defining audiences. The scores can also be used in creative ways to target or exclude certain customers from various campaigns, etc. Because these insights happen at the visitor profile level before flowing downstream to all your integrated systems, that machine learning insight is baked right in. It's always available to you. It's available in your data visualization tool, etc. And it benefits your entire tech stack. So some additional use cases here, these are just following the same theme, right? These are common business goals you likely already have, and we're simply adding in machine learning as a powerful ingredient to hopefully augment our current strategies to address each of these goals. So on the left, we've got the idea of re-engaging prospects who've shown some stages of micro conversion but haven't fully converted. We've got the idea of media suppression, preventing customer churn and increasing our retention rates, gaining additional insights in our data tools downstream, building loyalty, membership, funnel optimization, as I touched on earlier, identifying customer experience issues. This is a cool one. So you can easily use machine learning to find where you might be having problems on your site or your app and people are getting stuck. Obviously going beyond the concept of bugs, right, which would stop everyone in their tracks. And then lastly, we've got that intelligent cart recovery example I mentioned earlier. Now, I want to mention it's not that these particular use cases are set in stone. These are just examples. You can predict any user behavior that's being tracked in our Tealium audience stream CDP. So in the end, there are many ways that Tealium can help you with a machine learning project. You can receive an unparalleled pipeline of high volume, high quality data. You can now take advantage of this strong data foundation to enable machine learning powered audiences. Our machine learning capability can dramatically scale the speed and usefulness of the insights you gain. And lastly, with Tealium's capabilities across the full lifecycle of data, machine learning powered audiences can be immediately activated in integrated systems. So this list applies no matter what tools you're using, whether you're a Tealium customer or not. It all just calls back that emphasis on data quality and on how key it is to have good links between your systems, right? Now, you also want to find the right places in your systems, in your tech stack, to do various bits of analysis, and generating insights. In sum, we believe this is the next wave of bringing machine learning to the masses. It solves real-world problems that I experienced firsthand. And our goal here is to offer you machine learning functionality that lets you better know your customers and shape better experiences for them. We also want to give you back time and control over the process. That's huge. We've reduced some parts of this process from 60 days or a year all the way down to just a few minutes. And for other parts of the process, we've reduced it to effectively 0 minutes by completely handling it for you. So if you found this to be helpful, we have some great resources available for you in the attachments and links section. I just want to call out here a white paper and some great data sheets. And with that, let's see what questions have come through that James and I can help to answer.
Great, thanks, Dave. We actually are a little bit over on time, so we're gonna probably speed through and let's just have one question for James, for our special guest here. James, is there anything that you would highlight as far as enabling practices or technologies for ML? Maybe thinking about the things beyond ML that people need to figure out to make this a really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things on the horizon. One is regulation, right? So a lot of the stuff is very powerful, right? And regulation is catching up to a certain extent. So we kind of mentioned the European white paper on machine learning. They categorize these things in terms of risk, and there's a reason why I use a risk model to understand these approaches. Just be aware that of the efficacy and the kind of risks involved with these things, because we don't want to be like the cookies. We don't want to have to de-cookie your machine learning. So where we've had to now, where cookies were used and quite frankly abused, we don't want to go down the same route with machine learning. This stuff is only going to get more powerful and more valuable. So be aware, as long as you have a customer-centric approach to using these things, you should be safe. Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of kind of internal practice that we need to evolve as well. So yeah, given the limited time there, Matt, I think I'll end my comment there.
Great, thanks, James. That is all the time we have for questions today, but if you do have questions, please put those into the box and we will follow up with you afterwards to get your question answered. Thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to check out the related resources in the attachments and links section. Thank you again to James and Dave for joining us, and we'll see you all on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.